you do the roll call, please?
Tom Keeler,
Here.
Wes Miller,
Here.
John DePady, Kurt Dudley,
Here.
Ben Mathis,
Here.
Gene Peglow,
Here.
Steve Harling,
Here.
Gary Palmer.
Here.
Let's see. Listed on here. We approve the minutes of the May 13th.
I'll second that.
Still haven't got it. Okay, so that's for the tower in general. Release of ownership, release of agreement. It's supposed to be. I think we got that. Yeah. Thought we had that.
I had that down with this one, you did. For the building exit. Proof of bond for 2 estimates. Either change of ownership or you're paid to do it. Yeah, my report. I had building permit, but you said you'd have that, so we're good. For town, one time.
But 2 quotes to the bond, you said?
2 estimates of a proof of bond. What I had down here.
Yep. Is the EMI reported? I didn't see that. Building permit is, and the structural analysis is missing. It's here from the applicant.
No. Says there's an engineer's report. Is that the structural analysis? I don't see it. The structural analysis completed by POS Engineering. For additional information, see report of POS Engineering. Structural analysis report. That's in. I don't think that's included.
Not on this one. Next one.
So we need a motion for that, Lee, or? we good? Probably just good table on it. All right. Okay, so I need a motion to table it. Sorry. Second, all in favor? I'm sorry. Okay, great. Yeah, okay. Good. You help put this. Page What? I didn't. Well, I read the first 10 pages. Else wants to start it off. Go ahead.
Did we get that sent to us? Okay. So.
Yeah.
Yeah, we don't have it.
I did get it.
Okay.
All right, you guys talk about it then.
I'm sorry.
Just talk amongst ourselves.
I thought you guys got, I'm sorry.
It was a test. I read the whole thing.
Page to page.
Can't remember anything.
Well, you can, want to discuss it or wait till you guys have time to review it, I guess it's up to you.
Well, how,
Well, see,
Yeah.
road questions. High overview of it, like, can you go through the bullet points of what, I mean, we already moved the mandated parts, we don't care about that, but what's, I guess, specific to Barry that we could go about to make it customized product? Yeah. Yeah.
Can you give an example of that re-subdivision?
Sure. So, I don't know if they're very high, but they're small, weirdly shaped lots that don't maybe fit through the things that they've been around forever that, they may want to reconfigure their thing or subdivision. And probably they come to you with, maybe some huge piece of land. They want to sell it into three parcels. They want a buyer, they don't want part of whatever, and they're gonna split it out with family or. But as they get down stuff that maybe they've already come to you and you approve, but then they're building something or whatever. For whatever reason, that lot line doesn't make sense anymore. If this person needs more land, or if they need to go around something, go around a tree, like some of this stuff they should have probably figured out. But it's primarily that they're changing that line. I think there is a process in here that you guys would kind of look at the summary and be like, yeah, that's just a lot line. You don't need a whole stuff.
So if you already subdivided it, and you want to just move one of the lines, you can do that with a re-subdivision.
Yeah, it's primarily like. Sure, there's minimal things before me. Then that's. So, Department of Health, each has requirements for subsidizing 5 departments. They have different certificates with that. So some we're coming into is you have 4 new departments. So the New York recommends. That's what I put in here. It's a number you guys can choose, whether it's 2 lots, maybe the 3, 4. I wouldn't do anything more than 5. Sorry.
Start over.
Any comments there? Just want to kind of keep thinking and I'll keep going through.
We want an example. We set it up the way. At 100 acres, by 3 parcels, you have to go through this process.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to do 2 parcels,
You 2 or more. Anything more than 1 is a subdividing. Yep.
Isn't that anything?
If you're selling property to property, that's just like real estate 1-to-1. If you're splitting a parcel in any way, that's subdividing. Just kind of essentially, yeah. Correct. Correct. The Department of Health, you need certain certificates. This is more for, a lot of these examples are kind of the selling part, but this is if you have your 3 parcels and you're building house 1, house 2, house 3, if you are subdividing more than 5, you need a certificate to, it's for water. I'm forgetting the exact, but it's to make sure that you have enough water, they can be hooked up, they have, there's enough equipment, enough things to subdivide that many. And DEC is a similar thing. It's about the water and wastewater. So New York State
has kind of technical guidance when creating the law. Their guidance for creating the law is to do 2 or more, but as of recently 2024, but the Department of Health and DEC, those have been around a while, and so that is the criteria. If anyone is doing 5 or more, they would need to come before you and also separately get those certificates.
So, just a basic question. If somebody sold you, they own a farm, they live on it, they live in the house, they sell you the land, they keep the house, do they have to apply for a subdivision because it was all one parcel? And they're breaking off the parcel of the land?
Probably because, yeah, you're making another tax ID.
It's like if you have 100 acres, you want to sell here for
Are you staying on the rest of the 98 acres? Because if you're only making one, then it's just one lot you're creating separately, and that doesn't fall. If you're making 100 acres and
creating 2 or more.
you're creating 2 or more, so I that kind of goes more into like you're selling it, you're splitting it. It's 2 separate.
Well, the question is, that would be the same thing.
Yeah. The house stays.
The house stays with its number, and they're creating another number, selling that one parcel to me or whoever. Then do they have to apply for a subdivision?
Then probably if it is a small amount, you could say that it's changing the lot lines and being re-subdivision, but if it's being a new tax ID, I think it'd probably fall under subdivision.
But that wasn't any different than the question he just
Right,
asked.
right.
Yeah, a lot of the examples are like you're selling your building, so I'm trying to just think of like if you're staying on it, what does that, and maybe we need to think that through a little more. But it's dividing it into 2 or more lots, so I guess then yes, your example would be they'd need to come before you.
So is this, if you have a lot that doesn't have a building on it and you're dividing it in 2, that falls into subdivision of 2 lots. But if you have a lot and you have a home and you're dividing off one piece of it, you're not creating the piece that the house is on, but you're creating one other one.
I think I'll go back to what I said. If you're dividing the lot and there are 2 or more in any way, house, no house, it's subdividing.
How I would take it.
The definition reads, maybe this will help if, because I kind of just cut to the number. I don't know if this will help. The definition reads, the division of any parcel of land into 2 or more lots, blocks, or sites with or without streets or highways for the purpose of sale, transfer, or ownership, or sale, transfer of ownership, or development.
So it's not just a vacant.
Or sale, transfer of ownership, or development. So it could just be the sale.
So the answer to both of the questions would be yeah. So we'll make it 2, regardless if there's a house on it or not.
Yes, yeah. House does not matter. Okay.
their guideline. No, it doesn't give you 5. Kind of old. Did I hear that right?
No, I'm sorry. I mean, I'm clear. They are involved if it's more than 5. Not that they only think subdivisions are 5, but they get involved for water and things because if it gets to that high of number, they're worried that there's not going to be enough water and things. So they jump in at 5, but they don't. So I guess that's not their like definition of what a subdivision is. It's a definition for when they become involved. If that makes sense. The state technical guidance on subdivision from the Division of Laws, they use the number 2. They count 2 as the subdividing.
In your experience, have you all that have had that rule of 2, or have you been around some that have a greater number?
I have been around some that have had a greater number. I currently am dealing with one that has the DEC Department of Health 5, and I will say they have not had many subdivisions because of that high number, and it's been tricky to utilize. They are thinking they need a new law, so it gets a little complicated the higher number it gets.
I just was thinking about this. If we left it 2, correct me if I'm wrong, it's going to make a lot of work. It could potentially make. Also,
It could, but
because simple land division things, no matter what, any kind of a land division would have to come here.
New York State gives planning board subdivision as like the number one thing they work on, and anything else you do is through the town board. So the state finds you guys are the most prepared for subdivision and wants that here. So I will say that. I don't, and it is a toss up. I mean, some years you could have a lot of farms subdividing, and some years you could have none. So yeah, there might be some, but I don't think it's maybe going to be as crazy. But you guys know your town more. Maybe if you know a lot of farms are selling, splitting up, I guess you know the kind of the climate that's been going on.
How much work is involved in that? If you're doing, what do we have to do with them coming to us saying if they were dividing this property, then what?
Yeah, the law will spell out kind of.
There's a lot. Okay.
No, yeah, no, it is.
There are quite a few things. One of them being 10 copies of your plan stamped by a PE.
We can make less than 10 copies. People just like to make sure, like, the clerk, like, no one in the town has to print them.
No, the engineer.
Yeah, that's. Yeah. Mhm.
And right now, when somebody comes in, it's not, we don't do any of that stuff, right?
Yeah, I think that's why it's kind of important you guys have a law because you guys don't have one. But also, like I said, planning boards, that's like the one duty New York State gives you right off the bat, no matter local law, is subdivision. So they really should be coming before you guys.
I mean, you guys deal with this a fair amount more than anybody. Do you remember in the last 5 years
Oh, you buy a partial of a farm, yeah. And sometimes there isn't even a survey involved. I mean, so this would complicate a sale like that. Right.
Okay, going further into the law, just has little provision that this isn't going to affect, anything that's been subdivided up until this point. This law gets adopted, if it does. It has a little section for penalties if you violate this chapter, like kind of any zoning law. It just gives fines. The first one is 350. A second offense goes up to maybe 700, but you have like a time period of when you can commit it. It's like within a period of 5 years. And that's all, code enforcement stuff. Yeah. Mhm.
The other thing, section 7 says that whenever there was reference to this in our existing copy, that goes away.
Yeah, I don't think it's a lot of things since you didn't have a subdivision law, but it's just a thing you kind of add into a new law just in case there's a zoning code or anything that might go against it. People know if they have a subdivision, they're looking at this law. I think they are consistent because I know that Bridge O'Toole revised it a little bit, but I did take it from kind of surrounding towns, so I think you guys are all pretty similar. Okay, so the next one after fines is just saying that the code enforcement officer isn't going to give you building permits or anything if you're in violation of this law. If the code enforcement officer thinks you have a subdivision, you need to come here, and you aren't, they're not going to give you permits until you comply with this law, essentially. Um,
That would be, how would that work with a buyer if they went ahead and executed the purchase?
well, what do you mean? If they're buying a parcel and then they are subdividing it?
Well, if they bought it with the intention of say they went ahead and made a deal and purchased it, paid for it prior, and then after the fact, came here to get a building permit, realized that it was a subdivision.
And then they would apply for a subdivision application, yeah. If if a buyer is buying a parcel and they intend on subdividing and selling parts of those parcels, then they already bought the parcel. If the seller is planning on subdividing and selling, then that's on the seller to subdivide before. So I don't think it would happen really after the fact in many situations. Also, if that did happen and they didn't realize there was a subdivision law and he already sold to people and we realized it was a mistake, I mean, they come before you guys. So if they have, their head low and kind of like, we didn't realize, can we do it? I mean, it's up to you guys to say, okay, you weren't trying to violate the law. Yeah, get in the application, get in the stuff, and it doesn't have to be, yes, there's fines and all that, so the code enforcement officer can do their job so people follow the law, and they should follow the law. But also, things do happen, especially if this law is new, and if someone realizes it, yeah, they can come back and try to fix it. Then there's just civil enforcement. It's just kind of reiterating the other sections. Section 11 is tax number, not a waiver. So if someone does get a tax number from the assessor or anything, that doesn't mean that they created a legitimized division of land. They still need their permit. Fees and costs, the town board will set a schedule of fees, application fees, and then also, as we've done for other types of review, the applicant will reimburse the town for expenses for review of the planning board and its consultants. So submission, there's kind of two steps. It's like a preliminary application and a final application, and these can go together or they can go separate. So if someone has a kind of more basic subdivision, it is just, you know, splitting up the farm. They're not really building or anything on it, or maybe the buyer will subsequently, but that's on them. You know, it's kind of just straightforward. They could come to you, and if you guys have no questions, no conditions, you know, we can get to it, but you can kind of sign off that this preliminary plat can be your final plat and you can be approved. If it's more intricate, or even if it's basic but you guys have questions or whatever, then we can go through the process of splitting preliminary. They may need to do a few things to get what you want, and then going final. So that's kind of how that will work. And yeah, if anything I'm saying you guys have questions or don't agree, I know everyone doesn't have it in front of them, but just speak up. So we say to submit an application, you need an application form, which we will draft if this law gets approved. The application fee, and we do say 10 copies. It can be less if you guys want 5 copies. It's really just so the burden isn't on the town, really, with all the application details. But so we just picked 10. That's kind of what we saw at other places. So this is making the submittal include the preliminary plat, drawn to a scale not smaller than 50 feet to 1 inch, and include, and this is going to sound pretty similar to a lot of site plans, most of this, the name and address of the owners, the date of the map with the scale and compass, an illustrative plan of the lot, and if there's any street layouts. Again, this would be like a big, like maybe a bigger like neighborhood subdivision, subdivision boundaries and any adjoining developments, total acreage of the subdivision, including the specific lots, a plan for wastewater disposal and handling stormwater, the zoning classification and tax map numbers of the property to be subdivided, the zoning regulations, if there's any setbacks or things required in your zoning code. Just point out any important land features like wetlands, rocks. If it is kind of that neighborhood subdivision, you know, is there any plan for kind of a park or an open space? Stormwater pollution prevention plan, all the existing sidewalks, bikeways, footpaths. This one again is kind of what we talked about before, indications of compliance with the requirements of New York State Department of Health and New York State Department of Environmental Conservation. Those are going to be for those bigger ones. Further requirements, if you look at it and think of anything else you want to add. And then the seeker form and a waiver of submission requirements. So this again allows the planning board to waive any of the above if it finds it's not necessary. Like some of those are for that bigger neighborhood subdivision, and maybe it is just a farm doing just 2 lots. So, you know, you're gonna say we need this stuff, but we don't need to see every sidewalk, bikeway kind of thing. So that just gives you guys a little bit of you know, say in that. So if it is a smaller project, they're not scrambling to answer questions they don't really have the answers to.
And these are all the requirements.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So, this thing before they.
Yep.
And when we go through that the first time, we'd have the ability to go through the list and decide what they do or don't
Yeah, yeah. And the code enforcement officer is also going to kind of look to see if they have a completed application to get before, but it may be them telling the code enforcement officer, I have a complete application. They kind of agree, but are leaning on you of, hey, they didn't follow these 3 criteria. They don't believe it's applicable. Are you guys okay with waiving it? Yes, no, you know, go on from there. It depends where the property is located. I mean, if it's like a huge farm and it's 100 acres and it's 50 acres, I couldn't say no. That might be important if it's all going into the other person's property. So it's kind of a case by case basis. So then we have the final plat, which is asking for the same information as before. They can just, you know, reuse it, except to make any changes or additions required by the board. Again, this says the preliminary plat may be used as the final subdivision plat if it meets the applicable requirements and is revised in accordance with the board's decisions. Or again, like if they come before you and you don't have any changes, you can make that the final plat during that same meeting. If they do make revisions, we ask the revision dates to be shown and just kind of include the notations of what was changed. Again, we want indications of compliance with DOH and DEC, Department of Health, Department of Environmental Conservation. And then it's a lot of what before, and then yeah, signature seal of a professional engineer and or a land surveyor. And it's just kind of cleaning things up. So we want to map where someone writes down the notation like revise because of the planning board's recommendation this, and then we want a cleaned up copy, you know, a final one that would get filed. And then in addition, we're going to ask for the estimate of construction costs and the purpose for establishing financial security. Final design, oh, I'm sorry. Again, that's why that it says the planning board can waive some of these conditions. Like some of these things are for more of a neighborhood. Like you have a huge acre, you're subdividing it into a whole street of like 10, 20 houses. Yeah, we're going to want to, you know, we're going to want to make sure that developer has enough cost to cover that. They're not going to partially build on it, partially not. So again, you know, some of these examples are for the farm being split into 2, 3, and some of these are for like a whole neighborhood, a whole street kind of thing. So just, you know, keep that in mind. But again, that is why they say that why it allows the planning board to waive some of the criteria.
I was just curious, because on the preliminary subdivision plat application, it talks about the waiver, but then in the final submission, it doesn't talk about the waiver.
Okay, I think in 9 it says more detailed information may be required by the board. So I'll just make a note to also to just add that same sentence back in. Any other certificates, including but not limited to zoning changes, variances, special use permits? They may not just be getting a subdivision permit for that. This says submission of a draft copy of a developer's agreement if required by the planning board. Again, that would be for a larger project, and right in there it says if it's required by the board. And then a stormwater pollution prevention plan consistent with the terms of the final approval. And then just anything, and then it still gives you leeway, any additional information you may be missing, and I'll add in that you can also waive that. So that's kind of for what they're sending in. The next is procedure for how they do it. Does anyone have any comments on the what? So this says whenever any subdivision of land is proposed to be made and before any contract for the sale of or any offer to sell the lots in the subdivision, they need to do the application. Basically, the developer or subdivider or their agent shall apply in writing for approval of such subdivision and or site plan. So they're gonna get it says concept plan, and it says concept plan review is not required, but it's recommended, especially for those larger ones. So it's not required. It kind of like allows them to say, hey, we have this idea. I kind of want to get your feelings on it before we fill out this huge application kind of thing. And that just allows you guys to have a back and forth. It allows them to get a sense of what you may want, and no one may take you up on that. It's not required, but it allows, maybe some of those big developers or small ones, but to kind of get in the door and or really anyone to say, before I go through the process of this, maybe I, would like a little feedback. This is kind of my idea.
Buying this property and subdividing it. And they revealed their plan to the board, public by video, and then after the fact, didn't get approved, or did get approved. Is it fair to require someone, say in here that whenever any subdivision of land is proposed to be made before any contract for the sale, is it fair to say that? You know what I'm saying?
You're bringing private sales into the public before they happen. And I don't think that's right.
For what I was talking about before, or for the concept plan meeting? Okay, 16. So what we were talking about before. I guess I don't exactly follow, because if it's not at that step, then when would they apply for it? Like that if you get a building permit, you go before you build the building. If you do a site plan, you do it before. If you do a subdivision, you do it before the subdivision. That's just kind of the natural timing of it. So I guess I wouldn't know then when they would come in for the application, because if the deal's already done and they're already doing it, it's kind of late.
Well, I think you're 100% true. When would you bring it in if you don't bring it in then? And maybe for somebody that is building an actual subdivision of 10 lots and they're going to put up 10 lots in a cul-de-sac, and maybe that's the case, but you're bringing it all the way back to, I buy a farm from 3 parcels and I've been making a deal with the guy across the street, and we got to come here and apply for a subdivision before we even have a contract, a purchase agreement. That doesn't make any sense to me. You got to knock those out. There's got to be a difference between 5 or 10 lots and making a row of houses and somebody just buying a chunk of land. That's my opinion.
We
'Cause as soon as it comes here, it's public. I mean, that's
Yeah.
just, we're a public body, so.
It's a case where they do, I'm just thinking, like an agricultural exemption. Like in this case, if I have a big land and a piece of land and I'm making a deal with Kurt at this point, so with Kurt, so I got two I wanna sell to both of them, but it's a
Right.
deal that we handshake on. So I gotta come here and say, hey, I wanna subdivide my farm. And the intent is why you wanna do that, and I disclose, well, I wanna sell it to, and someone's listening on the phone and says, well, shit, I'll pay him a lot more than
Right.
those two will, right? I mean, that's what happens in the real. And well, is there any way around that? I mean, I understand all these watersheds and everything else and bike paths, but that's a different, that was kind of the subdivision we were originally thinking of as housing tracts. But now we're taking it down to two, which is really just subdivision of,
And with all those other things in there, you're allowing the planning board to ask all sorts of questions, all sorts of them, that would pertain to a cul-de-sac row of houses, but really doesn't pertain to buying a soybean field and a piece of woods to go hunt in.
you can make that number in the definition higher. I wouldn't make it too high. It can be 3, 4 if you're comfortable, but I have seen in the real world and in rural towns where it does get difficult higher, and it's not just big developers. So you can make it 3 or 4, whatever you guys are comfortable with. I mean, the only way would be like, to do like either make the numbers different or do 2 separate laws, like subdivision for big one or subdivision for little one, and I think that gets kind of confusing.
There isn't different classes.
I have
we would have
not
to create
seen
something like
that,
that.
no. I mean, we can create it, it's your local law, but I wouldn't say that's the norm.
Were we talking about major and minor previously?
Major or minor something.
Major subdivision.
Re-subdivision with the lot lines.
You don't have a definition for major and minor here. Just subdivision and re-subdivision.
Correct.
So if we wanted to raise the number, it would apply. You wouldn't recommend going over 5.
That's one way. I don't know if there's other. That's what I'm familiar with, but maybe there's other cases, like with, I don't know, stone quarries or something, that would be the same situation, or hunting properties or whatever. I mean, I'm just familiar with what I'm familiar with.
If you identify like that, subject to somebody trying to manipulate.
Y-
It was subdivided to the agricultural.
back in, to get his agricultural subdivided.
I can look into kind of what an agricultural classification would look like, kind of give a draft of that. I would advise doing it against like specific zoning, because I think that's, you might get more people abusing that and creating it into something that was not intended for. But if we just, instead of using the zoning classes, but just say, like, if your subdivision meets this definition of you're subdividing a farm, like I can look into that and get something
We can't
for
be
the
the only
board.
people that. I'm not that smart.
Okay, yeah, I'll look into it. I'll see if I find anything or try to come up with some language. I think, yeah, I'll look into that and I'll get back to you all. But so do we want to do that instead of changing the number, or we think we're doing both? Okay. Okay, so keep it 2 or more, but find a way to caveat the farm
Either
subdivisions.
agricultural or not to be developed or whatever, they're not buying it with a development plan or.
Just to farm 5 or more. I think if you have a farm like subdividing like 10, that maybe should come before you, but that's all up to you guys.
I don't think you'd have to go that high.
3 or 4. Okay.
Zoning.
Right.
Yeah, I would just want to be really specific because you can still like trade farmland for like renewables and things like that. So yeah, the more specific the definition may help. Because there are some things that fall under agriculture that I don't know if you guys intend to include or not.
I'm not smoothing myself whether or not the agricultural angle to try to make it easier for agriculture to make this is going to be easy to enforce. I think people may want to use that, play that card when they want to, if you have it that way. Whereas if you had it with a number, whether it's 3 or 4, whatever, you might be able to control it better.
I'm just thinking, if you had 100 acres and you just simply divided in half, now you got 250s. You're farming both 50s. The person owning the 150 decides they want to put a house on it. Do you have to come back to the planning board because it's zoned ag res?
He has to come back to get a building permit, but he's not subdividing,
Yeah.
he already owns it. Right?
That wasn't the purpose of the original sale.
Yeah, I understand what he said. So he's saying if you are saying you don't need to get a subdivision because you're going to farm, but later on that person decides they're not going to farm, they're going to create it into a residential, are they against the code? Is that correct? Yeah, I think that is what we would have to focus on.
I don't think they should have to come back here. But at the same time, you're circumventing what you originally made that for. Because it's should be able to put it.
37 houses.
Then you have to. Then you have to get a subdivision. The original sale of that division of that 100 acres was to form 2 agricultural properties, not a residential property. That was the original intent of that sale.
But if it's in ag res, you can't tell them what they can or can't do with it.
It was the intent of the original sale.
Yeah, but I would think we would do the same, in that same scenario. We would waive all these requirements. I mean, I would, like, if I'm sitting in here anyways, if you said, hey, I'm buying this land, I don't care about your watershed, because they already know way more about it, because they're buying it anyways, whether it's got a low, they're gonna tile it. He could change his mind, we can't prevent that, but I would think that we waive all those requirements and not make him go to 2 meetings, and I don't think we should be asking a question. I get what you're saying, if there's over 5 and it's a developer saying, hey, I'm gonna do this, we wanna see his. But I don't wanna know what someone's intent really is, not mine to, if he wants to put a cabbage field or solar field in it, it's gonna raise 2 different issues, and why should he have to disclose it here to us? I don't know. That's just my thing, until he goes and gets a permit to do it. I just think until we see the application, I don't know how detailed this gets into or how much. I'm curious, the application asks a lot of questions, so if you show up and I'm a seller, I'm thinking, oh crap, I just wanna sell this 50 acres because I need money, or whatever.
I'm not against any of that. I'm only saying it starts to open up a
Correct.
can of worms.
I get you, and then we're asking 1,000 questions.
It opens up. Yes. Well, it is because the original intent of the sale. You're creating a rule, a rule that separates farmland from residential properties, which makes it parcel. Can you do that after the original intent of the sale was to?
Probably not very often at once.
Just change the thing to 3. Now your minimum is 3, you put it 3 I'm good with that.
Okay, so instead, just switch the number to 3 or more lots. That'll get a lot of those kind of scenarios out of before here. Okay. Everyone kind of on board? Did you want me to still look into draft language for what we talked about, or just do 3? Okay. Let me just make a note, and then we'll continue on.
Question take up too much. If the farm, or I'm just using the farm, if the parcel, if it's multiple parcels that are being, the sale is happening over multiple parcels, that really doesn't have any effect as long as only one of them is being divided, correct? Most farms are made up of many different parcels. That's where I'm coming from.
Oh, if it's already a parcel, you're not splitting the parcel. Yeah, that's not subdividing. Even if it's made up of many.
Parcels. It's 5 farms or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So that really has no bearing on, it's just if you're splitting a parcel.
Correct.
Pre-existing. Already been divided in the past.
Yeah, that would go if you were buying 6 parcels, whole parcels. It would really be so.
Right, they're already divided.
Right.
They're already deeded separately.
Yep.
Keep in mind, now that you make number 3, you split and make a parcel, it's still some houses.
Yeah, with changing the number, people can do what they want. So I think that probably makes the most sense than just going up to the 3 and. Okay. Sorry, I need to get back to
So if you go to the 3, then if you're splitting a parcel once, you don't need to apply for anything, correct?
Correct.
Not to keep dragging this on, but this was brought to us by our intern. Okay? Because when they were dividing by 2, they were conforming lots. That's how we got to this place. I just wanted to recap how we got here. Can that still occur if we're at 3? Can I still go and divide my lot and create a triangle in the back? It's not a building lot. But I don't like that back corner. I don't have to call it a subdivision because it's only taking my 1, making it 2. Is that going to be caught by somebody? Because that's how we originally got here. There was non-conforming lots being created by subdivision. I'm just giving you why
Okay.
I'm here today. I don't even know what we're discussing this. If we go to 3, this is my only question, just trying to think of, do we prevent that from occurring?
A triangle
Well,
lot?
I'm just, like, I'm
Okay.
just saying, I got this whole corner, you got something, this line does not conform to bond or anything else. It's like water, and then they say, you know what? No one can get to it. I'm not gonna pay my taxes on it, you can sell it county off. Toxic mind. Just being, okay. Do we catch that by going to 3? That's how we got here. That's what Chad was concerned about, how we got.
You don't catch that.
Then we don't catch that.
Okay.
See, that is one of the benefits of 2 is that does mean anytime you subdivide your land, it comes before the board. Yeah.
Make sure it's. I'm not refuting the 3 number, I'm just
Yeah.
trying to get behind this discussion. It's
A good point. A good point. I didn't think about that.
I'm done.
All right. Well, how about we continue on, and then maybe at the end we can kind of bring back if anyone has more thoughts on the 2 versus 3. Does that sound okay? Kind of think on that for a little bit as we continue. So I think we left off at 16, which is when the application was brought in, and then kind of going again is making the concept plan review not required. Is that okay with everyone? It's kind of I don't recall if your site plan has this, but some site plans have like a sketch plan review. It's kind of a similar thing of letting kind of letting them get their thoughts. I want to work on all this, and you might see right off the bat, well, that's not going to work in our town, or we don't like this, and they're going to save some money by getting some kind of feedback up front rather than after they do all the application documents. But you don't need to if you do have kind of a more basic one, or you just don't feel like it. You're not punished at all by not doing it. So it's kind of like helps an applicant who would want that assistant but doesn't require anyone to get it. Then it just kind of talks about that you may also need site plan review and to look at that part of the code. Here again is talking about re-subdivision, which we kind of talked in the definition, and it just says if it consists solely of simple alteration of lot lines, then the normal subdivision procedure can be waived. So approval, this is, kind of typical things. You're going to get the preliminary plat, and then you're going to coordinate with seeker. So this kind of goes into the seeker part. Preliminary plat's not going to be considered complete until a negative declaration has been filed, or an environmental impact statement if you think there is a positive declaration. And there's some time periods that New York State requires that we're going to get into that isn't kind of up for discussion. That's the state. And this just says those time periods won't start until there's either a negative declaration or a notice of completion for that positive declaration. So planning board as lead agency under seeker, you'd have a public hearing on the preliminary plat. If it's a negative declaration, you can issue that. If you find an environmental impact statement is needed, you can do that. The public hearing needs to be within 62 days of a complete preliminary plat by the clerk, code enforcement officer, attorney deeming it complete. If you decide that there is a positive declaration, you can have a public hearing jointly with the notice of completion, things like that. All just things under seeker that are just kind of copied in here to keep it easy for an applicant to review. Talks about notice of a hearing. Then it talks about your decision. You can make it your decision within 62 days after the close of the public hearing. If it was a negative declaration, if you think an EIS is required, then the final EIS shall be filed within 45 days, the close of the public hearing. And within 30 days of the final EIS, the planning board will issue findings on that. Again, put your grounds for your decision: approve with conditions, deny. If the planning board is not the lead agency, no, I was like, I think that's me, but it's like, what's happening? Again, and then it also just goes into kind of the same thing, but just if you're not lead agency, if the town board is lead agent, if they're getting like multiple permits, and however that's gonna work. And then it when you do the preliminary plat, 5 days, the clerk must certify it and file it in the clerk's office. And basically this just says within 6 months of the approval of the preliminary plat, the owner must submit the plat in final form. And if they don't get it within 6 months, you guys could extend it or revoke it and make them go back. So, you know, again, a lot of these projects aren't probably going to take all this time up, but this is for that, you know, big subdivision. If you asked for more studies or a lot or layout changes or whatever, that they kind of need to get back to you within 6 months, which will probably happen, but just kind of gets them to keep things moving. Approval, this just says that you're going to approve based on what you said in the preliminary plat. Not going to, you know, give comments and feedback on a preliminary plat and then, you know, completely change your mind once the final plat comes before. And just that the applicant will have it in substantial agreement with that. And more seeker stuff, which we talked about. A lot of seeker stuff in here, but that's just from the state's guidance. So once you do a final plat, it will need to be filed. That's just, you know, mailing them the decision, filing it. This default approval is one from the state, so we can't really change this, but it does, again, kind of like I said, those time frames above, which are all, nothing is too rushed, it's all pretty standard, but if the planning board were to miss them, the applicant could be deemed as approved, so we just need to be really on top of those. It's just the state's way of, again, trying to keep things moving, but it shouldn't be a problem. And always, you can always talk to the applicant, hey, we don't have a meeting within this time frame, can you be at the next meeting? And most of the time they're fine, but just need to, you know, stay on top and make sure issuing decisions and things in a timely manner. This says if it's required to give to the GML 239M referral, that the final plat needs to be filed in the Orleans County Clerk, that they must comply with, you know, all the zoning regulations, different setbacks and stuff for that zoning district. This one is kind of, it's going to be for those bigger subdivisions. This is if you want to reserve anything for parkland and kind of how to do that. Just gives a little blurb about application for an area variance if they're trying to build something or part of their subdivision is, you know, not for that zoning district. sorry, 17.
Yeah.
Um, this next one, it was kind of mentioned above that you can waive any of the application documents, but actually this is kind of what we talked about before, kind of adding another waiver. This just gives a general that you can waive when reasonable any requirements or improvements for the approval with modifications or disapproval. Yeah, so just even though this law gives a lot of criteria, a lot of information, it still gives you guys the leeway to add things, ask for more things, and waive them if it's not applicable. So it does kind of let you, you know, form based on what kind of application is before you. This is.
I'm just thinking about when you have all these, and I'm just making a general statement, but when you have all these things listed and all these requirements, then we're tasked with the job of figuring out what to waive and not what to waive. Then when the next guy comes along and we choose not to waive exactly the same thing that we did previously, we're going to be scrutinized for that.
I think that's where the attorney comes into play. I mean, some of these bigger studies, so like, I don't think they need a stormwater pollution prevention plan. What do you think? Yes, no, you can give your reasoning. I mean, we can take out the waiver if you don't want it. Most towns
I
like
think you
it.
gotta have a waiver.
But
I'm just thinking down the road.
usually what I've kind of had applicants do, I'm thinking more on the site plan, but I have the law, that's the site plan law. I have the application form, and if I'm going over completeness, like, do they have a lighting plan? Do they have a stormwater plan? Do they have this plan? And if I don't see it, I write to them like it's incomplete. I don't see this one thing. And they either say, "Oh, yep, I'll get it to you," or they'll say, "Oh, it's not applicable because," and so that's your reasoning for waiver. It's not applicable.
Maybe question project in town that we have people showing up here with complaints about. I'm just using that as an example.
Yeah,
We went through the process.
Yeah, I'll just say, I know it was like a lot of things they had to include, but most of those are just things on the site plan that any surveyor, professional engineer is going to put on anyway. Like there's a whole thing for like adjoining properties, sidewalks, roads, like all of that is very typical. Really, the other kinds of documents are your seeker form, which we wouldn't waive, stormwater pollution prevention, which you might just want to ask your consultant, like the town engineer. Yeah, I don't know if maybe you guys feel comfortable waiving that, but I would get outside. Showing me where rocks are. If there aren't rocks on the site plan, you're not really waiving it because there wasn't any to show. So I think, like I said, like if we want to go back to that list, most of these aren't plans, kind of like in a site plan or a renewable kind of things. They're really just things to show on the site plan. I want to see the subdivision. I want to see everything here. So I don't think, you're not going to waive like the zoning classification and tax numbers, or again, like wetlands. If there aren't wetlands in the thing, you're not waiving them. They're not showing them because they don't exist. So if you kind of look at that list, and again, I know a lot of you don't have it in front of you, I just kind of listed it, but a lot of it isn't plans. Like it's the site, it's the plat, it's the SWIP, it's indications of compliance with Department of Health, DEC, which if it's a smaller subdivision, they don't need to comply. So that's their indications is I don't need to comply. Sorry. Um, and then we're asking for a seeker form. That's really it. So it's really seeker SWIP preliminary plat with all the things. So I really don't think you're waiving a lot. I think a lot of it just don't apply, which they can come before you. You know, hey, we didn't see any wetlands, but wetlands was on the seeker form, you know, and they can explain that. But other than that, if it doesn't exist, it doesn't exist. Does that make sense?
Is that something where we can just put in it, like, let's go back to agriculture, seeing how we talked about that being the two. Is that something that we can put, if the purpose, the initial intent of this is to remain to subdivide parcels for agricultural use? We won't require it following, like to Tom's point, that we're just consistent, just like we are with towers, when we ask certain things, like we waive, you know what I mean? So everyone that comes in, every farmer that comes in, we have the same checklist. Here's what required. It's gonna be agriculture, 1, 2, the other 10. Or you want, or is it case by case basis? I'm just asking the question to make it easier and streamline the process.
Off the bat, I think the easier way is to just have it on the application form. Just have a sentence like, if this is not applicable to your project, just write NA. I don't think it has to be. Yeah, it can be as easy as that sentence, and that way they're not it's not considered a waiver, but they're letting you know, yeah, I thought about this condition. It's not here, so we, you know, check that out, and that's kind of easier for you guys to just look at that application form and. Sorry, every time I go up on this document, it's always hard to find where I last was. I think we're in section 31. No.
Um,
Yeah, my office is in Holly, 15 minutes away.
yeah, once we all get to see it. Right.
Yeah, it's up to you. It, I'm.
Tough.
I understand it's tough when you're not looking at it.
I need to see it.
That's without being burdensome. Blocks or a couple different things.
Well, maybe there's some other way. So if you have a way that you want to have.
One thing I'll comment on that is that I think what you guys tried to do for us is put together a lot of identifies where we might end up in the future. And having this detail, this much detail, if somebody did come to town and say that they would be of subdivisions that they would have zoning. Just that. You know, it's not, and even though right now all we're doing is
Something else made it kind of like something for us to handle. The fact that some of the land would be like this guy didn't know what they were doing. How do we capture that? We could try and find a way to do that. Getting a story about why they're doing it. They don't need to explain. They want to sell a piece of land. Just want, if they need to record it so that it has some kind of oversight, some kind of guidance, keep them from making poor decisions. That's what we're trying to find. We don't want to say, why are you doing it, where land put houses on it, or have to go through a whole secret.
Well, okay. Yes, I have a couple of responses to a couple of things you said, but I know it's 37 pages. I know a lot of it is procedure, and I know it seems like a lot. If you really get into it and you read it, what we're asking for in the application, like I said, really isn't that much. It's like normal things you'd have on a plat, normal things. So I will say, I know it is a burden to have to come here and maybe multiple meetings. So I do understand that. But as far as the like coming up with plans, I don't think it's too much, and it is not that you need to do what other towns do, but it is typical that it's not atypical. Like it's more atypical not to make them come before you, I'll say. And for the code enforcement officer, I think this does help him because it's the only way he could, not the only way, but in some circumstances, an easier way to write a violation because you didn't subdivide it. It allows him to get into these properties. That's why there are the sections on fines and violations. And so, I mean, that is probably the easier way for him to monitor that of you subdivided land, you didn't go before the planning board, we wouldn't have liked that layout. So I completely understand not wanting to tell people what to do with their land and things, but from the enforcement side, this law is the better way to do that. And I also think that doesn't put the burden on the code enforcement officer to create what they would like to see with this land. They can just write a violation and have it come before all of you, which would be, you know, so I can try to think of something creative, but I think it's all built in this law, and that's how he is able to do that. Yeah, this is, you know, big benefits both ways. I think if that's the primary reason why we're here, I think 2 makes sense. But I understand the pauses for not to. I think, you know, we can be creative and write 2, and on the application form, like I said, just say if this doesn't apply to you, hit, you know, put NA. And once you all can read it and kind of maybe have more comments, but like I said, I have dealt with a lot of zoning codes, a lot of different requirements. I don't think what's required here is really a lot. I think it just seems like a lot because a lot is bulleted, but again, it's really just putting things on a map. But I know, I think you've all said pros and cons for 2 or 3. I mean, if maybe, if while you guys take a look at it, you want me to draft something about the agricultural thing just to see what that would look like. I'm not sure. I guess my like in the preliminary, it would still be at an open meeting. So I think that was part of people's problems. I think the one issue
Yep.
is the
I really don't, sorry. I really don't think that the trading of agricultural land is causing the unsaleable parcels, uncompliant parcels. Most of those, I don't think are being caused by farms being bought and sold. You don't end up with a small parcel that's landlocked when you do that. I mean, there is a few instances where farmers have sold off parcels of their woods to hunters, and they didn't do it correctly, and they don't have a right of way because it was fine. You can walk across my field, but 3 owners later, no. That does happen. I don't think it's a big problem, but it happens. But I think the non-compliant lots are more like some of those ones that have come in front of us, where the lot's just too small or too narrow, and they want to add a house where there's a garage and there's just not enough room. And well, that was a non-compliant lot. We should have never let that happen. That really wasn't have anything to do with farmers selling their fields. Maybe I'm wrong about that, but that's, I can't remember anything that ever came in front of us that got created by a farm being sold.
Or non-compliant lots. That lot. You done and you don't have anything there, obviously, like, keep that.
Most of those got created long ago.
There's nothing in place.
True. I agree.
I think that was a real.
To the subdivision, they just have to have a right of way, period. You've gotta have some kind of right of way. And that would, as far as landlocked or whatever, gotta have a right of way.
We have zoning, I believe. So if somebody did their homework, they would know that they shouldn't buy a lot without the right of way.
Right.
And the right of way should be this big.
Well,
Road frontage should be
sometimes
this
it's a
big.
gentleman's agreement, and then it goes away with the death of whatever. And the gentleman agreement doesn't apply to subsequent owners. Just gotta, if it's a subdivision, it's gotta have a right of way.
So,
Yep, I can come back. I think it would be nice if before the meeting, if there's any way I could have a sense of if you guys want to do the 2 or the 3 or the agricultural, because if you want some added draft language in there, just so I can have that prepared. And then I would just say there is a lot of language that's just New York State language that has to be in here. So I know a lot of the procedure goes on for a lot of pages, and
The application,
the application form,
yeah.
not until we agree on what needs to be part of the form.
Can we get a reading?
Other towns use, right?
Yeah. Okay, sure. I can get that.
Corresponding amount of 3,000.
Okay.
It's not- Maybe in those situations, they don't ask you to be
Mm-hmm.
in the office.
Okay, sure. Yep, I can do that.
So you'll send it to Tom, or, and then he can send it to Lee and everybody can get it?
Yeah. I won't go through everything in like big detail, but just to kind of the parts we haven't gone over. There is a large part of kind of considerations the planning board will make, and it doesn't tie you anything. It's just things you're thinking about, and there are that does get into more of the bigger ones, and it like you all were just talking about roads. There's a whole section of things you'll consider as roads, right of ways, things like that, if there are any easements. So again, this is all just things for the applicant to like be aware of that you may be considered, but doesn't tie them to anything. And just kind of thinking about private roads, sidewalks, yeah, easements, just those types of things, utilities if they need anything like that. So, you know, these are considerations. These are not things they have to include. So, of course, if it is a smaller subdivision, we would just skip over that part of the law when we're kind of considering application. But some of it, I mean, roads are still going to be important, whether it's a big subdivision or small one, like you said, just to make sure there's a driveway, way to get in and out. And that's what most of the rest is. Yeah, that pretty much is the rest of the document. So just what you can kind of tell what the rest of that is. I'll do a draft application form, get that circulated, and we can talk next time when everyone's had a chance to read it. I'm sorry, I thought you all had the law.
I did too. I thought it went to Lee.
When's your next meeting?
Lee, you have it now.
With everybody. I go with 3.
I go back to what we said, if we're trying to catch the original intent while we're all sitting there, it's 2. If that's what we're here for, because if we do 3, then we're gonna miss how we all ended up in this place.
I don't know.
No,
I'm still confused on what 2 is.
Who's up first?
I'll write that down. Maybe it'll be better in writing. I have a conflict July 8th, but hopefully Bridget O'Toole can come in. I'm not entirely sure though of her schedule, but I'm out of town, unfortunately.
Thank you for.
Yep, thanks for having me. Yep, no problem. I'll get you that stuff, and if any of you are reading it and have comments, not for the whole board, but maybe just individuals feel free to, I could go back and give, it was, this is not going to probably be a good answer for you. I couldn't get the exact hours. I'm just not on the internet right now, but it was a lot of combining different laws and cutting, pasting, and checking and make sure, because the state does a new technical guidance each year, so I was doing the most updated. So like some of the laws I'm looking at have since been considered outdated, so checking what they're doing. But because a lot of it was a little bit copy and paste, it didn't take like that much compared to writing it myself. I don't know if that was a
Considerable amount of work to me.
Yeah, I wanted to make sure I had enough towns like around that had, farmland, but then also making sure I'm getting what the state wants, so we are, following that as well, and not making a law that's already going to be outdated, so kind of getting their more recent guidance. Thank you.
Fee schedule. Our next item on the agenda. Did everybody get the these are all questions. All like
Is it the one where you're asking estimated salary?
here's the question. These are the questions that on so we can try to get an idea. If considered fees based on very different based on what is the estimated salary of your how many hours? So talk to Sean today about that. Then the anticipated salary is $1,000 a year. Is one of the objectives modifying the fee schedule to offset portions of all salary? Is intent for the to offset a portion of the salary increase. Anticipate hours less than 30. Based on the number of structures boundary which are vacant, this fair, our recommendation permit or demolition, no fee. Based on inflation, 2009 2024 increase across the board of 40% of all. prohibition. Based on past history, this common non-reimbursable. That one was, body, largely started. That's 5 years. What was the 4 years total? And he was going to get back. So those are some of the things came up with last week. So I don't know if we're ready to make a recommendation on the fee to the board, or I don't want to go forward with that.
I'll second that.
I got to think.
Should we I know it's too late to modify this, but at one point we talked about making it to the even cents or something, so it would come out to be cents.
The percentage?
Well, it wouldn't be the percentage, it would be the dollar number.
Is that whatever the number is?
Oh, I got you.
We've got some input.
3 cents.
So let's. Well, the recommendation of these. So we should. If we want, if that's the case, then we should have a motion to approve these.
There wasn't that many.
So, let's see, there's our solar.
Show us 40% next month and then.
Yeah,
We have two things. We have one that's existing fees.
Yeah, we have
and then
proposed
another
here.
that's-
This is the proposed.
proposed in smaller lot, this is the existing one with the bigger ones front and back, and then the proposed was like a different font.
Yeah, but,
Yeah.
but it was ridiculous what they were proposing.
Dollar one.
Yeah, yeah. That's what Chad
We should adjust the ones that we have.
Right, right.
Made a motion, got a second, and we voted on it. We're gonna do all this. Better figure out how we're supposed to rescind this and start over. But as of right now, did it. Not trying to be a stickler on meeting procedure, but
No, I
this is we need to do it right. I know the correct.
I think it's the same way. Move to rescind motion second. I think.
This is the person who made the motion after rescind.
I think most of the, well, but we're not gonna, some we didn't want that much more. Some were pretty.
40% across the board.
Without.
Zero on the demo. I think since we already made the motion, we gotta give it.
We can make that recommendation. If they don't like it, then they can go back to us.
Ask us to come up with the exact.
That's what they want.
You were sleeping.
This is the first time we ever got one back, but the engineer said it wasn't sufficient.
Insufficient capacity.
Want to put bigger guide wires on it. You know that, Kurt? Yeah, they want to go to 120 feet. They're 60 now, so you know.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
You're looking at this August.
Yeah, if
Yep,
you look
right
at
there
the
on
line,
page.
right in the middle. Go through the test and it'll show you which one did fail.
Or is it?
It was with the fail. I don't understand.
Since they did that, we have to know what the solution is, right?
He has to move his house or.
We asked for these for some reason, and this would be the reason.
It's to decide how we fix it.
No, but it
Look at
needs
what
to
they
have
gotta
one of
do.
these that said it didn't fail.
Says it right there. What do they think? Yeah, we are, but I don't understand why they said it anyway.
I wonder if we should get a. I wonder
Well, isn't this
The company-
structural analysis from
Right, the
third
company,
party anyway?
a separate party, so
Right.
they should be able to work with them and get it to be sufficient. So yeah, I think,
I say we postpone until at least can get on the phone. I mean, this is. Gotta be important. He's a rookie. Yeah, you're right.
the one on the table from last month, still. 'Cause we don't-
Is that what?
put it back up there for them.
I wonder, to Kirk's point, there's a disconnect, because I know we have a new zoning officer. That's the fact that we've had 2 applications. And no one's like here tonight to represent either one of them. I would call Jake, but the fact that this is a pretty big deal to submit this, so it's, say it's insufficient, but not take the time to explain what the project and what they're gonna do to rectify it. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's what I'm just saying, there seems to be a disconnect between us and our meeting right now.
So. Table this. I move that we table this cell tower. I can't read it.
15085 Eastbury.
Eastbury Road. Until next month.
Because we don't have enough information to move forward. I'll second that. Now we should discuss, but before we vote, that's what we're supposed to do. Discuss before we vote.
Makes it much easier.
So I'm good with that.
It's good, I'm good with it.
Your father wouldn't agree with that.
All right.
I was there. There were 4 applications at the county. The first one was for the village of Medina, and it was for a dog grooming business. She's already in business doing some dog grooming. She's just making it a legal situation now, not increasing parking or anything. That's on East Center Street in Medina. They thought that was, just glad that they brought it to the county, but yes, they let that one go through with no issue. Second one was again for the village of Medina. It was for Heartway Motors. The building in the back was a grocery store at one time, an IGA or something like that. It's kind of a storage facility for them right now. So they're remodeling their facility, kind of like they did with the shop here in Albion, and doing a new front on it, expanding the building itself. The Hartway Motors is, so they're going to demolish that small building to the northwest of the shop, right? Increase their parking area, increase their area where they can put vehicles, and making a larger repair shop at the same time. That one went through without any issues. Village of Albion, across the street from the high school, they had to amend the required parking. They're going to put a store in the old motor store there. What was it called before?
Right next to Cone Zone.
Yeah, right next to Cone Zone.
East.
Yep. And it's going to be a Dollar General. Yep.
What the hell?
So by the property size, they thought that by the building size itself, they're expanding the building up, but actually by the shopping store area is small enough where they could justify having 35 spaces. Right. The building size itself, if they included that, had to have 53 spaces. So they had to do an amendment to allow them to have less spaces than what was required by law. So they let that one. That was fine too. And the final one was just the town of Yates with their solar energy law. About 2 months ago, they brought up an addendum saying they were going to not allow any solar projects within the town. Within 2 months, they came up with a new solar zoning law. I think we don't need to change our law, but when theirs is published, it would be good to go in and see, because they have some interesting things in there for town. They split theirs into 3 zones, or 3 classifications. So, aside from being good reading, I don't think there's anything to change ours to justify what they did, but it's up to you. And that was all there was for the council. He was not there last month for health reasons. I don't know how serious that was, but they didn't let anyone there. But he was there the month before.
About a month ago. Dinah, right? Looked better. Said he was trying to get back there.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
I second it.
All in favor?